You choose college-educated parents, you're set for life. But if you're asleep on the day when parents were being chosen, or you kind of blew it off and said, I don't care, I'll take whatever you got there, and you end up with a high school-educated parent, your goose is cooked. And that's sort of the basic, that's the bottom line. But rather than telling you about all the data that show that, what I want to do is tell you a story. It's a story of the history of a small town in the middle of America. It's a town in Ohio. It's a town called Port Clinton, Ohio. It's called Port Clinton because it's on Lake Erie. Mostly white, about 5,000 people. I know a lot about the history of this town because it's my hometown. And I'm imposing that on you, I assure you, not because my hometown is bizarre, but because it turns out, shockingly, that my hometown is perfectly representative of what's happened in America over these years. So when I was growing up in Port Clinton in the 1950s, there was nobody very rich in town, nobody very poor in town. It was a modest town. I graduated from Port Clinton High School in 1959. Of my classmates' parents, nearly half had not completed high school. They had not completed secondary school. So this was a pretty modest town. And as I say, nobody very rich, nobody very poor. And now, 50 years later, we know how well that class did. And what we know, startlingly, is that that class was amazingly successful. 80% of us got more education than our parents and did better economically than our parents. And the kids coming from the wrong side of the tracks have done just about as well as the people coming from the right side of the tracks. There was very little class bias, it turns out, in the results of these lives of these kids. One of the most startling examples of that are the two black kids in my class. This is the 50s. So they did face racism, serious racism in Port Clinton. Both of them came from very modest homes. Nobody in either of their homes had ever gotten past the 3rd grade, that is basically 8 years old education. Both these kids graduated from high school. That's a big deal. From 3rd grade to high school in one generation. Both of them got fellowships to go to college. Both of them went to graduate school. Both of them graduated from graduate school and had serious professional careers. But I'm trying to illustrate Port Clinton in those years, in fact, empirically, this is not my Golden Glow remembrance, this is what the data show, was a remarkably equal opportunity place. So I went to college, met a girl there. We've now been hanging out together for the last 54 years. So far, so good. We had 2 terrific kids, both of whom went to Harvard, and they in turn had 7 wonderful grandchildren. I want to show you the pictures of my 7 grandchildren. All of our grandchildren, without exception, are either now in one of America's best universities or headed there. One of them is a young woman named, our oldest granddaughter named Miriam. Miriam is in her last year at a great college in America, and she's studying French literature. She spent summer before last in Paris studying, or so she said, studying French cuisine and French architecture. Meanwhile, back in Port Clinton, there was another guy named Joe. Joe decided not to go to college, but he got a really good job in one of the factories in town. Port Clinton was a town that had some small auto parts factories and some mines, and people, the dads of my classmates were fishermen on Lake Erie or manual workers or small businessmen like my dad. Joe's came from a working class background and, in fact, became a very successful member of the working class. He had 2 kids, just like me. His kids graduated from Port Clinton High School, and then the bottom fell out of the Port Clinton economy and the bottom fell out of the American working class. Joe's kids have never held a steady job. They've never gotten married, but that hasn't stopped them from having children. And I want to just read to you the field notes from one of my colleagues, Jen Silva, on this research team, field notes from meeting with one of Joe's grandchildren. Remember, now, I've told you about my granddaughter, Miriam. Mary Sue is his granddaughter. That's not her real name, but that's what we call her. And Mary Sue and Miriam are exactly the same age. They're both granddaughters. Here's the notes. Mary Sue tells a harrowing tale of loneliness, distrust, and isolation. Her parents split up when she was 5, and her mother turned to stripping and left her alone and hungry for days. Her dad hooked up with another woman who hit her, refused to feed her, and confined her to her room with baby gates. Caught trafficking marijuana at 16, Mary Sue herself spent several months in a juvenile detention center, failed out of high school. Her experiences have left her with a deep-seated mistrust of anyone and everyone, embodied in the scars on her arms, which we saw where a boyfriend had burned her in the middle of the night just a few nights earlier. Mary Sue wistfully recalls her stillborn baby, born when she was 13. Since breaking up with the baby's dad, who left her for someone else, and with a second fiancé who cheated on her after his release from prison, Mary Sue is currently dating an older man with 2 infants born 2 months apart to 2 other women. And to Mary Sue, this feels like the best she can hope for. The story is actually even worse. Mary Sue, not long after, told us what she thought was good news. Her older friend had found her a job working as a model in Toledo, which is a nearby industrial town. Mary Sue posted on Facebook not long ago that she'd figured out her problems. Her problem, she said, is that no one in the world loves her. And she's figured out how to solve that problem. Mary Sue's going to have a baby because the baby will love her. And if you think that Mary Sue is in a pickle, imagine Mary Sue's baby. I can list, if we have time, 6 or 7 things that we know would work to begin to help poor kids in America and to begin to narrow the opportunity gap. This is a case in which the most important challenge, I think, is developing political will, putting this higher up the national agenda. Now, in the last time we faced this problem, it was not Washington that fixed it. It was small towns all across America. And that's my image of what we need now. We need a grassroots mobilization to begin to narrow the opportunity gap, to give all of our kids a fair chance at the American dream, and in the process, help the whole country move forward.